Hello. Most investigations into the effect of violent media on those who consume it rely on the study of visual or visually interactive media, movies and video games being of primary focus. This is true for studies focused on long-term or short-term impacts. Visual media is engaging and dominant, but before there was ever controversy with what was on screen, there were debates over poetry, lyrics and songs, be they overtly divisive or obscurely subversive, and freedom of speech is always current. With the idea that words influence in mind, Brummett, Lennings and Warburton published a research report titled The Effect of Auditory versus Visual Violent Media Exposure on Aggressive Behaviour, the Role of Song Lyrics, Video Clips and Musical Tone. This is the article I'll be discussing in this presentation. It seeks to provide more insight into how media consumers' levels of aggression may be increased through exposure to aggressive lyrics and aggressive tone. This study challenges the focus on visual media by comparing the effects of violent auditory media and visual media, or a combination of the two. What can be gained by exploring different media modalities? The authors reference a 2008 study by Warburton, Gilmore and Laskowski, which also sought to compare differences of media violence effects for auditory versus visual modalities, and noted the observation of indirect forms of aggression being associated with violent music exposure, whereas violent visual media was more highly associated with physical aggression. It's an interesting question to pose, whether hearing something versus watching something aggressive could elicit different behavioural responses. The authors established the need to explore lyrical influences on thinking and behaviour as distinct from tone and visual media. The research aims to identify any possible difference in increased aggressive behaviour levels from hearing violent media in comparison to viewing violent media. The hypothesis is based within the theories of the general aggression model and general learning model that acknowledge the centrality of words in concept mapping. Therefore, lyrics of an aggressive nature would elicit aggressive responses, and this would be heightened by violent imagery. The authors propose that because of the strength of meaning that words provide, and therefore high potential to activate aggression-related triggers, that media exposure with violent lyrics would elicit aggressive responses, and the visual and lyrical combination exposure would elicit the highest levels of aggression regardless of participants' individual predispositions towards aggression. The participants were primarily undergraduate psychology students at an Australian university, with some staff members included. 194 participants in total, 99 female, 85 male, with a mean age of 20.66 years. There were no specifications given in regards to numbers of staff versus students, and they were all sourced from Macquarie University in Sydney. Participants were split into 5 randomly allocated groups that were exposed to the manipulated independent variable of violent media, with the separate groups being exposed to a combination of violent video and violent lyrics media, one or the other, violent video or violent lyrics media, or no media, with the last group being used as the baseline measure for responses. The media itself was a selection of 3 music video clips sourced and tested to be deemed as violent in visual and lyrical content with aggressive tone. The aggressive response was measured through a hot chili sauce test, where participants were told that someone who didn't like spicy hot food would need to consume their allocation of it, i.e. greater quantity of the dependent variable allocated by the participant, the hot sauce, equals higher aggression. Also to note is that the authors did seek to establish a number of covariates such as trait aggression and socially desirable responding before beginning the main study. Participants not exposed to any media rated lowest in aggressive behaviour and allocated less chili sauce in total. Participants with the combined exposure of lyrical and visual violent media related the highest, as seen in the display there. Participants who heard violent lyrics rated higher levels of aggression than those participants who were exposed to violent media without lyrics, or participants who were not exposed to any media. Male participants averaged higher levels of aggressive responses than females across all groups. This research would indicate that violent lyrics do increase aggressive responses, and that this could be a more elevated response than violent visual media alone may elicit. Investigations of violent media may benefit from broadening the scope of media, form, mode, being investigated in terms of behavioural studies into aggression or likewise passivity. In terms of relevancy outside of psychological studies, it's interesting to recognise the ongoing debate that continues in regards to censorship and media classification. Also that audio-only recorded music products are classified under the labelling code of practice through ARIA and AMRA, whereas film and computer games are classified through the Australian classification system. So different standards. As touched on by the authors in referencing the general learning model, anything influencing an individual's actions and responses is relevant to learning and behaviour and can therefore be used in ways to deliberately alter these, making this study relevant to real-world interactions. Identifying of the participants with the protagonists as shown in the video footage may have altered the impact of the violent visual media, with the principles of modelling suggesting that more closely identifying with an aggressor would more likely lead to behaving similarly. The participants were from a narrow demographic and age, also an educated background, assuming them the opportunity to be more able to challenge the concepts lyrically and visually presented to them, which in turn may mean less impact of the violent nature of what was presented to them. Whilst the authors have been careful to demonstrate their research and transparent in their process and data, it would be informative for future research exploring visual versus auditory media to be deliberately focused away from the young and educated within a very controlled environment, and test the consistency of results and conclusions against people outside of these demographics and conditions.